Hi, this video is going to be looking at chemical reactions with a particular focus on ionic bonding. Atoms can react with each other to form compounds. When atoms react, they form chemical bonds. Making bonds involves giving, taking, or sharing electrons. There are two main types of bonding that are needed to be known for the exam. These are ionic bonding and covalent bonding. This video is going to be looking at ionic bonding. Ionic bonding is where one atom gives an electron to another atom. This results in the two atoms becoming ions because they do not have a neutral charge, i.e. the atoms are either positive or negatively charged. The atom who gives the electron away has a positive charge because there are less electrons than protons. Protons have a positive charge and electrons have a negative charge. The atom who gains the electron becomes negatively charged, and this is because the atom now has more electrons than it does protons. The two ions are attracted to each other because of their opposite charges. So let's have an example. The example that we're going to use is magnesium oxide, and this has the chemical formula capital M, lowercase g, and capital O. So let's first have a look at the characteristics of these atoms, i.e. how many protons they have, how many neutrons, and how many electrons, and how many electronic shells are filled up by these electrons. If you are feeling confident about working out the characteristics of these two atoms from the periodic table, then pause the video now before I go through the answer. So let's start by looking at magnesium. This has the proton number of 12. Which means that there are 12 protons in this atom. It has the mass number of 24. The mass number is the number of protons and the number of neutrons. So we work out the number of neutrons by doing the mass number minus the number of protons. So we do 24 minus 12, and this gives us 12 neutrons. Our element will be neutrally charged, and this means that the number of protons will equal the number of electrons. Therefore, magnesium has 12 electrons. We now need to work out how many electron shells are filled by these 12 electrons. The first shell will take a maximum of 2 electrons, the second will take 8 electrons, and the third will also take 8 electrons. The electrons will fill the closest shell to the atom first, so they'll fill shell 1 first, then when that's full they'll fill shell 2, when that's full then shell 3. So magnesium with 12 electrons will have its first 2 energy levels full and will have 2 electrons in its third shell. So now let's have a look at oxygen. Oxygen has 8 protons. It has a mass number of 16, which means that it has 8 neutrons because 16 minus 8, which is the mass number minus the number of protons. Oxygen will also be neutrally charged, and this means that the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons. Therefore, oxygen has 8 electrons. It will have 2 in its first shell and 6 in its second shell. So there we have our two atoms. Remember that atoms are much happier when they have full electron shells. At the moment, magnesium has 3 electron shells in use, but it only has 2 in the third electron shell. Therefore, if magnesium wants to have a full outer shell, it either needs to gain 6 more electrons, and then it will have 8 in its third electron shell, or it needs to lose 2 electrons, which would mean that it would have 8 in its second shell and none in its third shell. Oxygen has 6 electrons in its outer shell, and its outer shell is the second shell. Oxygen can either gain 2 electrons to make this second energy level full, or it can lose 6 electrons. So those are the options for these two atoms to have full outer shells. So with the example that we have here, which is magnesium oxide, magnesium gives 2 of its electrons to oxygen. As magnesium loses 2 electrons, it has no electrons in its third shell. Its first and second shells are completely full, and therefore magnesium is happy. Oxygen gains 2 electrons, and these electrons go into its second energy level and join the other 6 electrons that are already there. Therefore, oxygen's outer shell is full, and therefore oxygen is also happy. As magnesium loses 2 electrons, it becomes a positively charged ion, and we indicate this by writing 2 plus in a superscript for magnesium. Oxygen gains 2 electrons and therefore becomes negatively charged with a magnitude of -2, and we denote this by putting 2 minus in a superscript for the O. The 2 ions are attracted to each other because of their opposite charges, and this is what is the ionic bonding. For more videos, content, quizzes and past papers, go on to www.elevise.co.uk.